Thanks everyone for coming. It's good to be back at Breaking Convention in a nice new setting as well. Very fancy studio here, or lecture theatre here. So I've been involved with cannabis campaigning since about 2009. It's gone through quite an evolution since that time, from very, very, very grassroots activism to now multi-million pound industry. So it's it's been a ride. I'm just going to take you through some of the things that have happened over the last few years, really, to say to how we got to the state that we are now. First of all, I'm a cannabis patient. I've got a prescription. I've got Crohn's disease in 2010. I've got given 2 years left to live. My intestines are just narrowed so badly, we're going to have to remove them. And even with the medication, it wasn't a very good prognosis. But fortunately, I had friends in America who gave me good access to cannabis medicine from their home grows and the dispensaries that they ran, because they had already had medical marijuana laws that they'd voted for. And within 6 months, I got my health back completely and realised that we needed to do the same thing back in the UK. So when I came back to the UK, it was a bit of a scrabble to try and find people that knew much about what was going on in America, because I was so surprised at what I learned over there. I had no idea that there were so many states that had medical marijuana already, and the journey that they had been on to get it and how they got it. So the UK Cannabis campaign, we looked at it hard and long, and we realised there's quite a few things that need to be done. We need to reduce the harm from the prohibition, really. That's the biggest enemy. Most people who have come to harm from cannabis is through the harm of the law. They get criminalised, they get the family split up, and it can be devastating, really. We want to provide safe access so people don't have to buy cannabis on the streets or from people that they don't know who's growing it or where the money's going. There's been situations in the UK where child slaves have been used to grow cannabis by international crime gangs, because it gives them so much profit. If you're not paying anyone to grow it, then you just maximise your wins, really. And we need to decriminalise personal cannabis possession, because that's, like I said, it's the main harm that comes to people. We need to let people, sell it and cultivate it. Use is not illegal in the UK, but your activity with cannabis it's your interaction with it that is criminalised, and that's what we need to decriminalise. It's all good to legalise it for medical use, which we have, but still create a two-tier system where some people are allowed it and some people aren't. And if you've got more than you should have, or if you've just got cannabis in general that you weren't prescribed, but it's cannabis anyway, you could still be criminalised for it. So all this kerfuffle is pointless, really. We want to create legal jobs. So again, we don't want people to go to prison for what they're doing. If you look at people in the United States who are working with cannabis, they're paying their mortgages, they're buying a car, they're raising their families, they're making other investments. If you go on the Angels Investor websites, if you're ever starting a business, you type in cannabis, you've got lots of people there who've made lots of money through cannabis in America and Canada who are looking to invest in businesses now. So it is obviously a good opportunity to make some money. Over here, we make people do dodgy things to hide that and wash their money, and it's silly. People want to pay their taxes on it, and we should let them. Education for consumers. A lot of people still don't know what they're smoking. They don't know enough about cannabis. They don't know how to modulate their use. And if with a little bit of information, this is what we found through the Cannabis Social Clubs. Anyone who's come to us with a problematic cannabis use disorder and has been told that they've got psychosis or something, they've come to the clubs and ask questions because they feel like they've been gaslit. And once they find out about indicas and sativas, different terpene profiles, it's like all weed smells a bit different. That's called the terpene profile. That's the different smells that in it. That's the different effect as well. So once you start teaching people these things, they can start tailoring their use and they have a much better experience of cannabis, and their lives, suddenly improve. We've got some people that have made some miraculous recoveries from mental health problems and from physical health problems just by adopting different use strategies. We want to reverse damage caused by prohibition, so we need to, look at where the impact has been made the most, in what communities. We know that prohibition is a racist pursuit. It's used to criminalise black people more harshly than white people. White people are 6 times more likely to use drugs than black people, but black people are 9 times more likely to be stop and searched by the police, and I think they have a 3 times greater sentence than white people. So it's still a really racist policy, and it needs to be called out. We need to heal these communities, and building the cannabis industry, we need to create equal opportunity. So like these social equity policies we're seeing in a lot of states on the East Coast in America, I think that is something that we really need to focus on here in the UK too. How did we, as the Cannabis Social Clubs, go about trying to achieve this? We had a really uphill battle. If you said the word cannabis out loud when we started, people would look at you, and you really would be worried about, people calling the police on you. Now, if you get your cannabis out in public, no one really bats an eyelid. I'd like to think we've made a big contribution to that by doing all our public awareness campaigns, our talks, protests in the park, getting involved with the local newspapers and media stations, going on the radio, any opportunity there is to talk about cannabis and give the good side about it. Like we've really rebranded the cannabis consumer and let people know that we're actually everyone. We've just been in hiding for so long, and we're sick of it now. We're coming out to say that this is who we are. We've formed really good relationships with the local councils, the police, and just opened up a dialogue with them to say, this is what this is who we are. This is what we're doing. We're not trying to hide about it anymore. And we think that if you know what we're doing, you shouldn't really have a problem about it. And when we have these conversations, they generally agree with everything that we're saying. They don't want to see family members criminalised for using a bit of cannabis. So you know where we are, you know what we're doing. If you've got a problem, come and see us. And they accepted that in 7 counties around the country, where we had cannabis social clubs that the police knew were operating, and that they had hundreds of members. One in Brighton, we had 1,500 members there when it was up and running before COVID hit. Like I say, we've just got to portray a good image. If we're not hiding and skulking around in the shadows, they don't really, it's hard to say, oh look, they're up to no good. We're out in your face. You can see what we're doing, you can see who we are, and we've got nothing to hide really. Like I said, with our conversation with the police, it's all about appealing to a mutual understanding. If they can see that the points that you're making make sense and it actually helps their policing strategy, up in the northeast, we have a really bad heroin problem. The drugs issue is really terrible up there. So a cannabis social club that stops people from using heroin and crack and meth, maybe that's not a bad thing, because we know the effects of cannabis aren't as bad. And that club's been running for maybe 5 years now. I think it's been in 3 different locations. It gets press all the time, and they're doing really good things at Teesside Cannabis Club. So our achievements at the UKCSC, we've changed the stigma. We've rebranded cannabis as such. It's not the talk to Frank version that the government had tried to push out years ago. Medical cannabis became much more widely known about. Our cannabis social clubs acted as a first point of contact for patients who didn't have anywhere else to turn. The other medications that were taken weren't working. For me, for example, I was on 16 different medications before I started using cannabis, and now I just use cannabis. And I was bedridden and told I was going to die, but I'm here standing 12 years later, so screw you. And that's in replacement of chemotherapy drugs and strong opiates, steroids. And the side effects of those are very horrible. So we got the police support of police forces. We had 160 clubs in total around the country, and that totaled over 60,000 members. And that is, it's a lot of people to learn from about their experiences and hear what's going on. So you really do start to build up a strong idea about how cannabis consumers are treated in this country, the difficulties that they have to go through, the problems they have with the police and family courts, and the discrimination that's faced. And that seems to be dropping in some areas, but it has gone up in other areas that we'll see in a second. And we've funded and opened up a lot of different clubs. We've given people a lot of support on how to run their small businesses, and created a lot of confidence in the fact that change can be made. It's not always going to be the way that it has been, and you just got to work at it. So here's a few of the police crime commissioners that I've met. I've been on the BBC a few times. We've been on there for a few hours in total now. That's and it's really good exposure to talk about what we're doing. We can challenge some of the myths around cannabis and skunk, like for example on that BBC show there. I think this is at the moment where I can't remember George Freeman, MP George Freeman. He is saying, "You can't possibly be telling me that skunk is the same as medical cannabis, can you?" And I said, "That's exactly what it is. You know, this what you're calling skunk that's sold on the streets." And I've got some here. I'll show you, you know. This is legal. This is legal. Yes, clap, stop when you hear that, then, yeah. So this stuff here, this is called Hellfire. You know, I'm prescribed Hellfire, which is an OG. You got some there too, yeah. This batch has got some bad reviews actually on UK medical cannabis. There's been mold, bugs. Mine's been all right, but it's just super dry. It was packaged a year ago. But on the front, it says 22% THC, less than 1% CBD. You know, that is the government's classification of skunk. And that's what they're prescribing now. So, really, really annoying. Arthur Jones, Ron Hogg, sadly not with us anymore, but it's probably the biggest supporter of cannabis that this country has ever had from any member of the establishment. He's created an open door for us to be able to do what we're doing, and like I say, the Teesside Club is still running up there. Hardell Dinser, he was the police crime commissioner of Derbyshire. He was the head of the drug strategy. He was really open to what we were doing. He made a distinction between the cannabis social clubs and the black market. He said, "How do we know? How can we be reassured that black market cannabis isn't going to leak into the cannabis social clubs, and cannabis social club cannabis isn't going to leak into the black market?" And at that point, I feel like we jumped over a hurdle, we crossed the line, and that gave us a lot of confidence that we were doing the right thing. Where will I put that? And Arthur Jones from North Wales in Wrexham, he was a really big supporter. He did some podcasts with us, and we actually did a talk at the Senedd, the Welsh Assembly, which was a really amazing thing to do. The UK has legalised medical cannabis, like I say, in 2018. The clinics can prescribe it. You can get tinctures, you can get flowers. Oh, really, only 5 minutes left. You get tinctures and flowers, and like I say, there's still quite a few issues, really. Sentencing guidelines got reduced from 9 plants to 7 in 2020, which was a step backwards. We were hoping we could get it up to 12, really. And that's just at the point where they start thinking like, okay, we'll put you in prison for growing if you're over this number. So they reduced that, which made it a little bit more difficult. There's less cannabis social clubs since COVID, and the CBD market is declining. Here's some of the issues with medical cannabis that we've been seeing. Like here, this is mold, this white fluff here. You don't want to see that. That can give you bad lung issues. Aspergillus is a really dangerous mold to inhale. And they suggest you vaporize it as well, so it's even worse, because when you combust it, at least you might be burning the spores off. You've got bugs in it here, and this is some really strange moldy burn. I don't know what that is, but this one, Releaf sent me bottom of the bad bug, they meant bud there. The weight was short, so it was less than was meant to be there. It was stalks and scrap, very angry. You know, this is your medicine. Like You don't get that with paracetamol or your tramadol, do you? We've ended up with this situation because of AstroTurfing. This is the deceptive practice of presenting an orchestrated marketing or public relations campaign in the guise of unsolicited comments from members of the public. So basically, they infiltrate grassroots movements and corporations. They infiltrate grassroots movements. They get them to paint a picture and a message, and then that really acts for corporate gain rather than for the purposes of the grassroots, the patients, the consumers. We worked so hard for so many years to try and protect the interests of the patients. Unfortunately, some of these guys got in, and we've ended up with this medical cannabis system, which is overpriced. It's about £10 a gram for good quality cannabis, sometimes 15. If you know what you're looking for, you know you're going to have to pay higher price for the money, and that's more expensive than street weed. So a lot of people are just going back to the black market because of the quality and because of the price. And if you're trying to create a policy that removes the problems of prohibition, deal with the problems of prohibition and remove them. Don't create a policy that leads to massive profits for companies before you've actually helped the patients. We're getting there. It's a slow process. There's some really good people doing some really good things, and there's lots of companies that are starting to grow in the UK. They're all exporting it around the world, and all the patients that are getting cannabis in the UK is being imported. Try and make it make sense. I can't. This is just to demonstrate that, we feel like the UKCSC, we've done a lot of the heavy lifting. We've done it from a human rights perspective. We looked at the United Nations Convention on Drugs from 1961, and we thought, how can we operate with this legally? And that's what the Cannabis Social Club model is. It circumvents that convention. We got a lot of public support. We want a regulated adult market in totality. We don't just want medical cannabis. It is a good first step, but things like growing. If you look at any of the states in America that went legal for medical first without the right to grow for patients, when they went recreational, they've never reintroduced the right to grow. So once you lose that, you're never going to get it. And I feel like it really upset me for the last 4 years. I found it really hard to do anything because I thought, damn, they've closed the door on something that I care so passionately about. When I've lived in America and Spain and been able to grow, legally, it's been absolutely wonderful. But we did a grow campaign for absolute years. Since 2014, we tagged people's plants to give them security of mind that if they were if they were caught when they were growing, they would have someone to back them up to say, yes, they're not organised crime, yes, they're a patient, they're not doing it for financial gain, that they're just a normal person. Please, can you go, be light on them? But up until then, there'd been no sign of cannabis union to support cannabis growers in the UK. So we stepped in and we did that. It was all non-profit. We did collect data as well to try and help raise the plant limit. But again, like I say, it went down rather than up. And just, again, another example of this AstroTurfing, Voltfast, they knew exactly what we were doing at the Cannabis Social Clubs. They knew we had a campaign called Right to Grow. We sat down with them hundreds of times. We were in parliamentary meetings with them. They always said that you're never going to get the right to grow. You should give up. Don't bother. And then one day I got a phone call in the morning. That's us in Vice in 2017. And then in 2019, I got a phone call on this morning from the head of Voltfast saying, we need you to give us your list of growers. And I'm like, I'm not giving you a list of growers. What are you talking about? Exactly. That's what I thought. I literally laughed. I don't like laughing at people down the phone. And they said, yeah, it's to do with this article in the newspaper. We got Carly's amnesty. And I'm like, what's that? And he said, it's in the newspaper. Have a look. And I'm like, what do you mean have a look? And they told the newspaper that they had 200 growers and they were collecting all this data. And they weren't. It was us. We were. And they just expected us to hand it over. Just like that. And they were going to do it because they wanted to hand that list over to the police and get us all busted, is my belief. I can't guarantee that's what we're going to do. But Carly handed herself in when she did this, and she ended up getting busted. And they changed the name of the organisation, and they tried to encroach on territory that we had been, working on. And we're all game for people working for us. The more people, more brains that we can put together, the more progress we can make, and we can all benefit out of this. There is room for everyone. This is a largely populated country in a very small space. And like I say, there's international markets involved with this. There's room for everyone involved, but they pushed us out. They threw us under the bus after we'd done all the heavy lifting. And then they, like today is 420 in London. They are now, organisers of 420 after we've been organising it since actually 2011. It's a shame that things do go down this route. Another example, AstroTurfing. I started a magazine, The Quarterly here. I've got 3 copies over there if you want to take one on your way out. Talks about everything about the UK cannabis social scene and cannabis social clubs. But as soon as I did that, I went into advertising to the big companies that were moving in from the CBD space, and they refused to do advertising, and then they launched their own magazines. I started up an organisation called Medican Campus. It was a medical cannabis education centre that was going to set up in Brighton. And I told these guys, and then before they were Centre for Medical Cannabis, and then they set up the Centre for Medical Cannabis. You go to people with your ideas, expecting people to help, and they run off with them. So we're the grassroots. This is what's been happening to us. I suspect it's going to be happening largely in the psychedelic community as well. And the legal side of cannabis, we got CBD, and these organisations here are working in cooperation with the corporations to make sure that small CBD companies are pushed out of the market and are not allowed to operate, with lots of new legislations like the Novel Foods Act. You have to pay your way to play, basically. And yeah, like I said, the CBD market is reducing quite a bit. A lot of products are disappearing. People that have found products useful, that have got small amounts of THC in, are being taken off of the shelves now. And people that have found them useful for seizures are not finding them useful for seizures now. So they've been left without an option. They are not able to get medical cannabis because they're children, and the NHS won't prescribe it, and a lot of the private ones still aren't prescribing to children. Where do we go from here? I feel like it's a Rubik's Cube that changes every time something happens, and you have to relearn every face. I'm not very good at the Rubik's Cube, so maybe I should learn that. It might help me in real life. We can't do the same thing over and over again, because that's the definition of insanity, which apparently Einstein didn't say. I thought I'd put it in there because I'm all in for sharing the truth. This phrase came into play in the 80s for anti-drug use pamphlets. I just thought that was a bit ironic that I'm using it in a drug presentation. So, and again, we can all be cogs in this wheel. We just got to get it going. So, thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you.